Hello, everyone, and welcome to Healthy at Work. My name is Catherine Wilcox, a workplace health specialist with a big passion for helping people thrive at work. From the home office to the corporate office, from the assembly line to the front line, I've got you covered here for your healthiest life at work. Now let's dive into today's show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healthy at Work. Catherine here, and this week I'm so excited to bring you an episode that I feel I need as much as anybody listening or watching today. Today we're talking about attention, and we're talking about how to reclaim some of our mental attention, energy, and focus in a world that is constantly calling for us to pay attention to something different. Now, in the workplace, this has huge implications for us, right? Many of us work using digital technologies. Many of us might have careers that, are connected to things like email and collaborations online. Many of us use digital collaboration tools to help us connect to our colleagues. And for some of us, these colleagues might be all the way around the world. And so we work in an economy of attention, meaning that people are constantly trying to sell us ideas, to get us to pay attention to things, to get us to pay attention to their needs and priorities in this increasingly connected world. And so this leaves many of us feeling quite exhausted. It leaves many of us feeling like we may not have accomplished anything of importance by the end of our workday because we've just been reacting and responding to either crisis, to other people's needs and priorities, or we've found ourselves quite distracted, again, by a lot of the compelling, attention-grabbing headlines, emails, or other bids for our attention that we come across in the course of our work. So today at Healthy at Work, we're going to talk about ways that we can begin to reclaim some of our cognitive sovereignty, meaning how can we feel more empowered and in charge of our own minds so that we feel as though we're focused on what is most important in the work that we're doing, and we're not lost to distraction. We're not, lost to doom scrolling at work. We're not losing, precious time and energy and attention to things that aren't really that important. So I have three areas of focus. And, these are things that, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I really have a strong intention of trying to focus more of in my own life too. We live in such a intense time in human history where we have access to everything and to everyone. And everyone has an opinion and an agenda and an urgent and important, call to action and message for us. So how can we begin to, again, filter, a lot of that noise out and remain grounded and focused on what is truly important for us? So the first area of focus is what I'm going to call boundaries. And I know that's a big bucket to be focused on. But if we're thinking about sovereignty or this idea of, ownership of our own minds, independence, control over that, we need to think about having, boundaries and having a filter around what gets in and what stays out. So, I think about my own work day, and, one of the things that I struggle with at times is really starting my day focused and clear about what my own priorities are, as opposed to just reacting and responding to other people's needs and priorities or what, appears in my email inbox. Can anybody else relate out there? Sometimes if I'm feeling overwhelmed, it feels really easy just to open up my email and begin responding. And this is something that allows me to experience like a quick sense of wins or accomplishment, for example. But more often than not, it actually leaves me feeling, if I've worked, for example, the whole morning like that, that I haven't really gotten much done, or I haven't really focused on my most important priorities. So one thing to think about around, having this sense of cognitive boundary is before you open the email, before you start responding, um, take some time to get clear around, okay, what are my most important priorities today? And you've probably heard me say before, we can't have 20 most important priorities or 20 most important things. So we need to be reasonable in what is, accomplishable for us in any given day. But write them down before, you get the instant messages, the texts, the emails. Get clear around what it is that you need to do in your own working life to feel like you're moving forward with what's important. So create that boundary initially. Now, some of you may have response rules, right? Maybe it's your job to respond to people and to put out the fires and to ensure that things are humming along in a certain way. And so what I'm going to suggest to you is still take a few moments before you open up the email, the text, you dive right into that to center yourself and get clear around, okay, I know I have to respond to people today. That's part of my job. But what are those important things? And maybe it's just one, because maybe that's your reality, is that you are responding and, you know, that's what you need to do. That is your priority. But get clear around, okay, what is it that is essential for me to accomplish today on my own terms, not on anybody else's. So another way we can begin to create boundaries is setting aside time for those things that are important to us, but we never seem to get to because there's always, either another fire to put out, or somebody needs something from us, right? And I raise my hand as someone who can do this too, or we've allowed ourselves to get distracted because the thing that we know is really important is overwhelming. So it's easier to just open up our email inbox and start responding, right? Makes us feel good. It makes us feel like we've accomplished something. But what, the downside of that is that we might feel like we never get to that important thing, right? It can steal our time, and it can be a way of trying to avoid, the discomfort, right, of doing something we know is really important, but is maybe hard to get started, or we have some kind of blocks too. So, thinking about that, schedule the time, put the time aside, and put it in your calendar, and take it seriously. An appointment to, deal with a task that, again, maybe isn't urgent and on fire, but is still important to us, is a valid commitment. Okay. So put it in your calendar and honor it. This is important. What's scheduled gets done. So, schedule what we could call these deep work or focus blocks for us to actually get work done. I know as much as anybody how easy it is to just go from meeting to meeting to meeting, email to email to email, and then never have time to do any of the important work, or follow-ups that come from those meetings or those email exchanges. So schedule that time for that focused work, reclaim that time. And what you might do even further to that to support this type of focus time is get rid of the distractions. Put your phone in the other room, right? Have it nowhere near you. Turn off notifications. Put do not disturb on your door. If you use an instant messaging platform, turn it off. Tell your team, tell, the people in your house, if you work from home, that you're not to be disturbed, during this time. And, focus during that time. That's time just to get the important work done. So boundaries, right? Boundaries, incredibly important. The other thing we can focus on if we're trying to reclaim some of our mental space is saying no to more things. Saying no to the newsletters, unsubscribe to them, unless they're really adding value. Say no to meetings that don't have an agenda, are not going to involve making a decision, are not going to add value to the work that you're doing. If you have the ability to do that, learning to say no is something that can really help protect our cognitive sovereignty. And I know that in the workplace, we all have different roles, responsibilities that we might not be able to say no, for example, to someone that has the right to direct our work, right? Like our leader. Um, but think about from your own sphere of influence and control, are there things that you can just eliminate so they're not taking up that mental space at all for you? Okay, so getting clear, what is important to me and what are some of the activities, the things that are taking up mental space that are not adding value in my own life and my working life. The second area of focus is around critical thinking. So we live in a time where the robots are doing a lot of thinking for us these days, right? And don't get me wrong, I don't mind the robots. They are here to stay. We have to learn to work alongside them. However, we also have to learn to remain discerning, right? To remain discerning. So to be able to evaluate and think for ourselves around whether something is useful, whether it is helpful, whether it is actually a problem or it's a problem that's been fabricated so that someone can solve it for us and sell us something. Um, we always need to be discerning about the agenda. If something is calling for our attention or presented to us as urgent and important and necessary, we should be asking ourselves those questions. Is this urgent? Is it important? Is it really necessary? What is the agenda, behind what is being presented to me? Is there something somebody wants from me or needs from me? So these are the types of questions that I really encourage us all to kind of pause. And again, this kind of comes back to the idea of getting out of that reactivity mode. And I know how compelling it is, in the day and age we live in. Um, and there's a lot of psychology behind things like marketing and branding, right? Things grab our attention and they're very compelling. They might be shocking. They might draw us in by playing on our vulnerabilities and insecurities, right? There's a lot of thought that goes into how to grab people's attention in an economy where attention, is being competed for. So really learning to ask those critical questions, slowing things down before we react, just to kind of pause and consider I feel like a skill that's really going to serve us as we continue to wade through this economy of attention that we find ourselves in the workplace and beyond it. And then lastly, I want to talk about down regulation and offline regulation. So, many of the distractions that we have, many of the things that kind of call for our attention and energy are things that are connected to our, digital tools, right? We might be using, computers and tablets and smartphones and smartwatches and, all of this technology, again, it's incredible. It's an enabler. It allows us to connect. It allows me to reach you, who are listening and watching out there. However, it's also really important if we're thinking about how to remain in control of our own time and energy and mental attention, to be able to disconnect in a useful way from these technologies as well. So, what are some of the things that can support us? Reading printed books. So, I'm a big fan of public libraries. I hope everybody listening or watching has access to one in your community. Doesn't cost, anything to go and check out a bunch of printed books and um, read them. Very good, very regulating for our nervous system to get away from, blue light. It can be a great part of your sleep routine, for example, to incorporate an activity like that instead of just looking at our phone at night. being in nature, taking a walk. If you're at work and you have the ability to kind of step outside on a break, even, being in the light, being away from your device. So I know it's very tempting, right? If you, work in a career where you have to be on, or if you're in manufacturing and you have to like do a lot of focus work, you don't have time to be near your phone a lot of the time just to pull it out. But can you also think about going outside, taking a quick break, being in a green space or a blue space? So being around water, also very regulating, calming for our nervous system. That's something that can help us just reclaim some more space in our mind and is very good for calming our energy and calming our attention. Um, Other things that can be really helpful when it comes to cognitive sovereignty, reclaiming energy, attention, downregulation, are using our hands. So, really fascinating to understand the role of our hands in the evolution of our brains. So, humans in our time as hunter gatherers used our hands, right, for hunting, to make tools, to do a lot of physical labor. We kind of evolved in this context of, our hands helping wire our brains, actually. And what we find today in, human history is that when we use our hands to make things, so, to cook, to knit, to make furniture, to paint, to tinker with our cars, whatever your hobbies and interests are that involve manipulatives or using our physical hands, this is something that actually reduces activity in the limbic system of the brain. So the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, the alert, danger, part of the brain. And it's something that helps increase activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is something that can really help us with things like calmness and planning and our executive functioning. So really helpful and useful. As a way of, creating more mental health and mental space is to think about activities that involve the hands. I know for me, journaling, so actually physically writing with, my hands is something I find incredibly regulating too. So think about what some of those things are for you. Again, ideally away from a screen, using something manipulative with your hands as a way of just trying to, again, create that kind of mental spaciousness and that opportunity to take back some of our, mental time and energy and focus. So I'm going to be practicing these strategies alongside you. Please let me know what you think in the comments section. If you found value in something you heard today, I invite you to share this episode with others. And I look forward to seeing you back here next time for more Healthy at Work. Bye for now, everyone. Thanks for listening today. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not medical advice or mental health treatment. If you're struggling at work, please reach out to the supports within your workplace or community. This podcast was gratefully recorded on the unceded and ancestral homelands of the Lekwungen-speaking people of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations.